Today we're going to start with Chapter 5 of the Tale of Despero. The Princess P looked down at Despero. She smiled at him, and while her father played another song, a song about the deep purple falling over the sleepy garden walls, the princess reached out and touched the top of the mouse's head. Despero stared up at her in wonder. The P, he decided, looked just like the picture of the fair maiden in the book in the library. The princess smiled at Despero again, and this time Despero smiled back. And then something incredible happened. The mouse fell in love. Reader, you may ask this question. In fact, you must ask this question. Is it ridiculous for a very small, sickly, big-eared mouse to fall in love with a beautiful human princess named P? The answer is yes. Of course it's ridiculous. Love is ridiculous. But love is also wonderful and powerful, and Despero's love for the Princess P would prove in time to be all those things: powerful, wonderful, and ridiculous. "You're so sweet," said the princess to Despero. "You're so tiny." And Despero looked up at her adoringly. Furlough happened to scurry past the princess's room, moving his head left and right, right to left, back and forth. "Cripes," said Furlough. He stopped. He stared into the princess's room. His whiskers became as tight as brown bowstrings. What Furlough saw was Despero Tilling sitting at the foot of the king. What Furlough saw was the princess touching the top of his brother's head. "Cripes!" shouted Furlough again. "Oh, Cripes! He's nuts! He's a goner!" And, executing a classic scurry, Furlough went off to tell his father, Lester Tilling, the terrible, unbelievable news of what he had just seen. He simply cannot be my son," Lester said. He clutched his whiskers with his front paws and shook his head from side to side in despair. "Of course he's your son," said Antoinette. "What do you mean he's not your son? This is a ridiculous statement. Why must you always make the ridiculous statements?" "You," said Lester, "this is your fault. The French blood in him made him crazy." "C'est moi," said Antoinette. "C'est moi. Why must it always be I who takes the blame? If your son is such the disappointment, it is as much your fault as mine." "Something must be done," said Lester. He pulled on a whisker so hard that it came loose. He waved the whisker over his head. He pointed it at his wife. "You will be the end of us all," he shouted. "Sitting at the foot of a human king. Unbelievable, unthinkable." "Oh, so dramatic," said Antoinette. She held out one paw and studied her painted nails. "He is a small mouse. How much of a harm can he do?" "If there is one thing I have learned in this world," said Lester, "it is that mice must act like mice, or else there is bound to be trouble. I will call a special meeting of the Mouse Council. Together, we will decide what must be done." "Oh," said Antoinette, "you and this council of the mouse. It is a waste of the time, in my opinion." "Don't you understand?" shouted Lester. "He must be punished. He must be brought up before the tribunal." He pushed past her and dug fiercely through a pile of paper scraps until he uncovered a thimble with a piece of leather stretched across its open end. "Oh, please," said Antoinette. She covered her ears. "Not this drum of the Council of the Mouse." "Yes," said Lester, "the drum." He held it up high above his head, first to the north and then to the south and then to the east and the west. He lowered it and turned his back to his wife and closed his eyes and took a deep breath and began to beat the drum slowly. One long beat with his tail, two staccato beats with his paws. Boom, tap, tap, boom, tap, tap, boom, tap, tap. The rhythm of the drum was a signal for the members of the Mouse Council. Boom, tap, tap, boom, tap, tap, boom. The beating of the drum let them know that an important decision would have to be made, one that affected the safety and well-being of the entire mouse community. Boom, tap, tap, boom, tap, tap, boom. Chapter 7. And what was our own favorite member of the mouse community doing while the sound of the Mouse Council drum echoed through the walls of the castle? Reader, I must report that Furlough had not seen the worst of it. Despero sat with the princess and the king and listened to song after song. At one point, gently, oh so gently, the pea picked up the mouse in her hand. She cupped him in her paw and scratched his oversized ears. You have lovely ears, the pea said to him. They are like small pieces of velvet. Despero thought that he might faint with the pleasure of someone referring to his ears as small and lovely. He laid his tail against the pea's wrist to steady himself, and he felt the princess's pulse, the pounding of her heart, and his own heart immediately took up the rhythm of hers. Papa, the pea said when the music was over, I am going to keep this mouse. We are going to be great friends. The king looked at Despero cupped in his daughter's hand. He narrowed his eyes. A mouse, he muttered. A rodent? What? Said the pea. Put it down, the king commanded. No, said the pea, who was a person not at all used to being told what to do. I mean, why should I? Because I told you. But why? Protested the pea. Because it's a mouse. I know. I'm the one that told you he was a mouse. I wasn't thinking, said the king. Thinking of what? Your mother, the queen. My mother? Said the pea sadly. Mice are rodents, said the king. He adjusted his crown. They are related to rats. You know how we feel about rats. You know of our own dark history with rats. The pea shuddered. But Papa, she said, he is not a rat. He's a mouse. There's a difference. Royalty, the king said, has many responsibilities, and one of them is not becoming involved personally with even the distant relatives of one's enemies. Put him down, P. The princess put Despero down. Good girl, said the king. And then he looked at Despero. Scat, he said. Despero, however, did not scat. He sat and stared up at the princess. The king stamped his foot. Scat, he shouted. Papa, said the princess, please don't be mean to him. And she began to weep. Despero, seeing her tears, broke the last of the great ancient rules of mice. He spoke to a human. Please, said Despero, don't cry. He held out his handkerchief to the princess. The pea sniffled and leaned down close to him. Do not speak to her, thundered the king. Despero dropped his handkerchief. He backed away from the king. Rodents do not speak to princesses. We will not have this becoming a topsy-turvy, wrong-headed world. There are rules. Scat. Get lost before my common sense returns and I have you killed. The king stamped his foot again. Despero found it alarming to have such a big foot brought down with so much force and anger so close to his own small head that he ran toward the hole in the wall. But he turned before he entered it. He turned and shouted to the princess, My name is Despero. Despero, she said. I honor you, shouted Despero. I honor you was what the knight said to the fair maiden in the story that Despero read every day in the book in the library. Despero had murmured the phrase often to himself, but he had never said this evening had occasion to use it when speaking to someone else. Get out of here, shouted the king, stamping his foot harder and then harder. Still, so it seemed as the whole castle, the very world, were shaking. Rodents know nothing of honor. Despero ran into the hole, and from there he looked at the princess. She had picked up his handkerchief and was looking at him, right directly into his soul. Despero, she said. He saw his name on her lips. I honor you, whispered Despero. I honor you. He put his paw over his heart. He bowed so low that his whiskers touched the floor. He was, alas, a mouse, deeply in love. Chapter 8. The Mouse Council. 13 honored mice and one very honored head mouse heeded the call of Leicester's drum and gathered in a small secret hole off King Philip's throne room. The 14 mice sat around a piece of wood balanced on stools of thread and listened in horror while Despero's father related the story of what Furlough had seen. At the foot of the king, said Leicester. Her finger right on top of his head, said Leicester. He was looking up at her, and it was not in fear. The Mouse Council members listened with their mouths open. They listened with their whiskers drooping and their ears flat against their heads. They listened in dismay and outrage and fear. When Leicester finished, there was a silent, dismal, and deep something intoned the most very honored head mouse. What is wrong with your son? He is not well. This goes beyond fevers, beyond his large ears and his lack of growth. He is deeply disturbed. His behavior endangers us all. Humans cannot be trusted. We know this to be an indisputable fact. A mouse who consorts with humans, a mouse who would sit at the foot of a man, a mouse who would allow a human to touch him. And here the entire Mouse Council indulged in a collective shiver of disgust. Cannot be trusted. That is the way of the world, our world. Fellow mice, it is my most fervent hope that Despero has not spoken to these humans, but obviously we can assume nothing, and this is the time to act, not wonder. Lester nodded his head in agreement, and the 12 other members of the Mouse Council nodded their heads too. We have a choice, said the head mouse. We must go to the dungeon. He pounded his fist paw on the table. He must go to the rats immediately. Members of the council, I will not ask you to vote. Those in favor of Despero being sent to the dungeon say aye. There was a chorus of said ayes. Those opposed say nay. Silence rang the room. The only noise came from Lester. He was crying, and 13 mice, ashamed for Lester, looked away. Reader, can you imagine your own father not voting against your being sent to a dungeon full of rats? Can you imagine him not saying one word in your defense? Despero's father wept, and the most very honored head mouse beat his paw against the table again and said, Despero Tilling will appear before the mouse community. He will hear of his sins. He will be given a chance to deny them. If he does not deny them, he will be allowed to renounce them so that he may go into the dungeon with a pure heart. Despero Tilling is hereby called to sit with the Mouse Council. At least Lester had the decency to weep at his act of perfidy. Reader, do you know what perfidy means? I have a feeling you do. Based on the little scene that has just unfolded here, you should look up the word in your dictionary just to be sure.